The Australian Financial Review.
These roles are stressful. They're also hugely enjoyable. There's no nursing in my family. There was no medicine in my family. It literally was a spur of the moment. But actually, I've loved it and never looked back, really.
Hi, I'm Sally Patton, editor of Boss from the Australian Financial Review, and welcome to 15 Minutes with the Boss, a podcast about success and failure and everything in between. And along the way, we're hoping to get some really great advice from our leaders. My guest today is Professor Shelley Dolan, the Chief Executive of Royal Melbourne Hospital. Hi, Shelley, how are you?
Hello, Sally. I'm really well, thank you.
Now, as I said, you're the Chief Executive of the Royal Melbourne Hospital. Royal Melbourne is one of Australia's biggest hospitals. You admit more than 130,000 patients a year. The hospital conducts around 28,000 surgeries a year, of which more than 11,000 are emergency operations. And amazingly, also nearly 94,000 people present themselves at your emergency department every year. They're really big numbers. I guess for you, having a sense of purpose in your job is not an issue. You've got a lot of purpose.
Absolutely. I think everybody that works at the Royal Melbourne, we have nearly 13,000 people working, and I think we're all there joined with the same purpose, which is fantastic.
Now, Shelley, we don't have long, only 15 minutes, so I'm going to start the clock right now. And my first question is about your morning routine. What time do you get up? What happens?
So I wake up at about 10 to 6 every morning, and my lovely husband gets up early to bring me a cup of tea.
Oh, how nice.
Yeah, it's very, very kind. And then I get showered, ready. I usually get all my clothes ready the night before, and I get in the car, I put on the ABC. Am I allowed to say that?
You're allowed to say that.
And I learn about everything happening in Melbourne overnight so that I'm ready when I get to work to go into my first huddle of the day, knowing what's happened in Melbourne overnight.
So being in the medical profession, I'm interested about what you eat or don't eat at breakfast. What do you or don't you eat for breakfast?
So I know this is totally the wrong thing, but I don't have breakfast, and I know I should, but that somehow hasn't got itself into my routine yet.
So have you never been a breakfast person?
On holidays, yeah, but it doesn't seem to feature during the work week.
So does coffee just keep you going, or do you drink more tea?
So probably I drink more coffee now I'm in Melbourne, but I only drink probably 2 a day. But I have become a bit of a coffee snob, I've found out, and I really love Melbourne coffee.
And how does that coffee snobbery manifest itself?
So when I go back to Europe or travel internationally, it's not quite the right standard. And I didn't know what people were talking about when I first came to Melbourne, but, it's taken hold of me.
Now you do.
Yes.
Okay, my next question is about a pivotal moment in your career. Can you describe a time where perhaps you got a job promotion, perhaps you worked on a project or said yes to something, and it really changed the trajectory of what you were doing?
Yeah, so I think probably that's when I decided to move away from my clinical role. So I was the nurse consultant in charge of an intensive care unit in London, and I'd always worked clinically from when I had been a junior student nurse all the way through. And my boss at the time, who was the executive chief nurse, said I should apply for his role because he was leaving. And my first reaction was absolutely not. That's moving over to the dark side, the executive, the management. And I loved working with patients and the team in intensive care every day. And he said to me, you have huge influence in the intensive care unit and in the outreach team, but I have influence across the whole hospital, and that's what you would have. And he said, you like reform and you like making things better. And in this role, you can do it for every patient that comes in the door, not just the ones in intensive care. And it was that really that influenced me And then I did apply for that executive role and then went the executive path.
So what do you think your boss saw in you all those years ago that you couldn't see in yourself that prompted him to suggest that you apply for that bigger role?
I think at every one of our meetings, we met monthly, he was my direct boss, I would always be pushing for the next thing. And we were doing quite a bit of advocacy across London. And I guess it was that he had seen.
Right. Okay. My next question is about a piece of career advice. What is the best piece of career advice you've ever received?
So the first one is very simple. If you have a wobbly feeling in your gut that something's not right, so you might be making a hire or you might be agreeing a budget, and you just have this feeling that there's something not right, to trust that and to go after it and find more data points, find more evidence, but to trust yourself when you feel worried about something.
So can you give me an example of a time when you perhaps have not trusted something in your gut and what happened?
Yeah, so very long time ago when I was a senior nurse consultant, so I was acting for a nurse executive, and I was asked to look at some reporting, national reporting, and to report it slightly differently, which would have had the outcome of making things look a little bit rosier than they necessarily were. And I felt that wasn't the right thing to do, but came under a fair amount of pressure. And then I did it, but regretted that I'd done that. So the following week came back and said, actually, I can't do this. I'm absolutely sure it will come back to haunt us. So I assured the person that I was reporting to that although we were going to give news which actually wasn't good, we had a plan to improve. And actually, she was really good and she agreed, and that's what we did. And thank goodness we did, because it would have been the wrong thing, I think, otherwise.
And correcting your course was not a difficult thing to do, or was that quite difficult?
It was difficult because I'd never acted into an exec role before. There was quite a lot of pressure. It was the only statistic that was going to be very negative, and it particularly showed on my service. I felt like all of my colleagues would be exposed, and I was obviously aware that the hospital would be exposed, but I guess I kind of knew that I couldn't do it. And actually, it was found later that some people had painted their figures in a bit of a more rosy way. So that gave various organisations and countries a problem. So I was so glad that we had stuck it out.
Great. Okay, so quick piece of advice number 2.
Nearly every week in a very big health service, there are things, operational things that come in from every direction. But you have to keep your eye on the long-term vision. So not to be distracted.
So keep your eye on the long term. I love that. On that note, Shelley, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to open the chatterbox. Welcome back to 15 Minutes with the Boss. I'm here with Professor Shelley Dolan, the Chief Executive of the Royal Melbourne Hospital. Now, Shelley, this is our section called the Chatterbox, as warned. The chatterbox today is in front of me rather than you because we're in different cities. You are going to have to rely on me to be honest and fish some questions out of the box, and we'll have a bit more Q&A. Are you ready for this?
Thank you. I think so.
Okay, so here I am fishing on your behalf. Do you have a coping mechanism for high stress situations?
These roles are stressful. They're also hugely enjoyable. I think the important thing is the balance. So it's really important to be able to give enough time to the role and recognise that there are going to be really stressful things that come up, and they are going to affect one. And so then very deliberately deciding, okay, so I now have a weekend. I need to come back to my family, to my children, my husband, and to do activities, whatever they are, that I really love. And that gives a sort of space to mitigate the stress, and then you face it again when you go back to it.
Interesting. So are you very conscious about the number of hours that you say work every day, that you're not working until 8 or 9 o'clock so that you can achieve that balance as you talked about?
So do I achieve the balance? No, but I try. At one stage in my career when I wasn't achieving the balance, my lovely husband said to me, we're not seeing you and the children deserve you. And I remember it was a big shock, and I just slid into a practice in London where I would get home at 10 every night, be up at 5 in the morning, and the only time was the weekend. And it's not fair on a family to do that. So I think I very deliberately try to manage the stressful atmosphere that we all work in from time to time.
And what about things sort of during the day? Do you have breathing techniques? Will you get up and go for a walk around the block if something or someone is driving you nuts?
Yeah, look, honestly, I do work with amazing people at the Royal Melbourne, so it is quite rare that somebody would drive me nuts. So one of the things, I love poetry and I love Shakespeare, and one of my colleagues when I left London bought me a lovely Shakespeare compendium, and just very occasionally I close the door, get that down, and just look at some wonderful stanzas from, Jacobean England and think, yeah, it's fine. You just got to get a perspective back, haven't you?
Fantastic. I love that. Okay, I'm going to have another fish in the box on your behalf. If you could master one new skill instantly, what would it be?
I think I'd like to be able to speak lots of languages. And I tell you why, because the Royal Melbourne is a very multicultural place. We have patients from, so many languages and so many countries, and we have staff from many, many different cultures and countries. And it would be just lovely to be able to cut through and just to speak in, the same language, and the nuance of that improves communication would be fantastic.
So just on that, do you spend a lot of time on the wards speaking to patients, speaking to staff, and how do you fit that into your day?
Yeah, so I do it every week. I'd love to do it more than I manage it, but I do it every week. So I'll go to a different ward or area and just have a chat with some of the nurses and some of the patients and their families. So last week I was at part of the Royal Melbourne called the Royal Park, and I was on one of the older people wards. Oh, the atmosphere was just gorgeous. Patients were very upbeat and telling me all about what had brought them in, but what also hopefully was going to take them home soon. The nurses, the doctors, everybody, they were so committed to the care of the older person, and they'd made me some scones, jam and cream, I think that was the English theme. So it was just lovely.
That's pretty good. Go for a stroll on the wards and get some scones.
Yeah, it was very good.
Okay, I'm going to have another fish in the box. When you were at school, what did you want to be when you grew up?
First of all, I wanted to be an actress, and then I wanted to be a theatre director. My first degree was in English at university, and we wrote a play. When you're very earnest and very serious and you think you know everything about the world, and I was pretty young as a university student, and we wrote a play from James Joyce's Ulysses, and honestly we thought we were so brilliant. Anyway, we took it to the Edinburgh Festival. It was the biggest flop. I think only our families came. We thought we were great, but I think that's what told me that I may not have a career in being a theatre director.
So how did you morph from the theatre to health and nursing?
I was in my third year of my university degree, and people were deciding to go into law or teaching, really. And I thought, well, I don't really want to go into law. I knew I didn't want to teach English. And I was in London. My dad wasn't very well at the time, and I think that affected me a bit. But there was this sign up. It was on the Edgware Road, and I think I was just literally wandering along. and it was the Nursing Information Centre, Nursing Careers and Information Centre. So I just popped in and said, look, I don't know what to do. I'm just finishing my degree in English. Is nursing, interesting? At that stage, because this is hundreds of years ago, they didn't have many graduates going into nursing in England, in London. So they were very, very keen and told me it was all sorts of brilliantness. But the key thing they said was you get paid right from the get-go. So I thought, well, that sounds good. And they really sold it to me. And I loved my training and it was great fun and never looked back, really.
That's an amazing spur-of-the-moment decision to see a sign about nursing, walk in, ask them and say, okay, I'll be a nurse.
And there's no nursing in my family. There was no medicine in my family. So it literally was a spur of the moment. But actually, I've loved it. And it's been a wonderful career.
Okay, I love that. On that note, Shelley, our Chatterbox section is over. I now have one more question which we ask everyone who comes on the podcast, and that is, if for some reason, whatever reason, you weren't the CEO of the Royal Melbourne Hospital, what would you be doing?
So I don't think I should be a theatre director.
Been there, done that.
Yeah, done that in a tiny, unsuccessful way. Do you know, I'd love to study again, and I would do something in the arts, but not for a purpose, not to become something, just for the joy of understanding more and learning.
Okay, well, I wish you all the best in your new career of studying for the pleasure of it. And on that note, Shelley, our time is up. Thank you so much for allowing us to spend 15 minutes with the boss. It's been an absolute delight.
Thank you.
And thank you to everyone for listening. If you like the podcast and you want to hear more, consider sharing the podcast or writing a review, as it helps us to reach more people. And follow us wherever you get your podcasts. At the Financial Review, we investigate the big stories about markets, business and power. For more, go to afr.com and you can subscribe to the Financial Review, the daily habit of successful people, at afr.com/subscribe. This podcast was hosted by me, Sally Patton, produced and edited by Iona Rennie. Head of audio is Alex Gow, and our executive producer is Fiona Buffini.
The Australian Financial Review.